Good morning. Good morning, all. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. Well, it had to end eventually, didn't it? After a few weeks in which it appeared that the summer might last forever, the heavens opened here last night. Mustn't grumble, though. I did manage to get in one last fishing trip. The lawn got a final pre-winter shoot back and size at the weekend, and the bushes and the trees in my back garden are currently smacking their lips together at the arrival of a long overdue drink. All that being said, I saw the weather this morning and I wondered if I might sneak in one more trip to sunnier climes before Christmas. Watch this space. Yes, my other half is currently laid up with a bad back. That's her right there. And there is Gary Muirhead wishing her get well soon. Yes, do get well soon. Ken Hatcher's just arrived as well. Morning, Ken. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Now, has anyone else seen, and Jim Turner's just arrived as well. Morning, Jim. Anyone else seen the Construction Inquirer headlines this morning? If you haven't, let me show you this. Vistry, the house builder company, Vistry, has basically said that it is going to start meeting with subcontractors this week to discuss a 10% pay cut on contracts. I'm just going to say good morning to Dan Cullen as well. The Inquirer understands that subbies across all trades are being asked to discount 10% off their bills for existing contracts from January and all new work going forward. And one subcontractor said it was made pretty clear that if we can't do this, they'll find other firms that can. Two things here. Let me get that off the screen temporarily. Two things here. First of all, what a bloody liberty. Subcontractors and suppliers need to trim 10% off their bottom line so Vistry can retain its margins. Doesn't seem fair. More worryingly, I think, is we've seen this kind of thing before. Seeking discounts, pushing out credit times are all a precursor to tough times ahead. The worry now, of course, is that if the Vistry supply chain agrees to play ball, then other major contractors will almost certainly follow suit. And there's a quote towards the end of the Construction Inquirer article that I think pretty much sums it up. Let me see if I can find it for you. It is right about there. It is that. It is the same old cycle again. Everyone talks about improving standards and quality. Then as soon as the market starts tightening, it's all about costs. Ain't that the truth? What do you make of that? Should subcontractors be forced to drop 10% off their bottom lines just to help out Vistry? Love to get your thoughts on it. Now, on to cheerier matters. And before we get the show underway, we do have a prize up for grabs. I did mention it yesterday, and there it is. It is a Volvo electric rallycross CE dealer team baseball cap, obviously. I'll show you the sides because there's some stuff on that. As you can see, there's an Encon logo because they're involved as well. There's a Parker Hannafin logo there as well. They're on both sides. Yeah, there it is. It's one of those with the sort of meshy back thing going on. But Volvo CE dealer team, all of that relates to the fact that Volvo are very active in the all-electric Rallycross Championship. Not only are they helping to maintain and build the tracks, but they've also got their own team, which I've been to see a couple of times now. So for your chance to win that very baseball cap that I hauled back all the way from Frankfurt just a month or two ago, all you need to do is type the word Volvo into the chat and you will be entered into the prize draw. To make life nice and easy for you, I've actually done it. There we are. There is a banner rolling across the bottom of the screen that tells you exactly what it is that you need to do. Just type Volvo, Volvo. I had trouble spelling it for a second there. Volvo into the chat, and we will get to that forthwith. And we will be drawing a winner at random at the end of the show. Now, you can, of course, as always, have your say on today's show in the usual way. Just type any comments or questions into the chat. But if you'd like to lend your voice to the show, you can also leave us a voicemail message that we may or may not use at some point in the future. Let me tell you how to do that. We have a button for it somewhere. There you are. Leave an audio message and you just go to speakpipe.com/demolition news. There you are. What's Chris Field saying here? I thought fart may have been a better line for that hat. Fart? Not sure why. Okay, but fine. Yes, now without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, roll the post the question of the day. I roll the intro, post the question of the day. Same thing, almost 600 times now. You think I'd be getting it right now by now. And then we're going to get this show on the road. Thursday, the 12th of October. Welcome to the tranquil green pasture that is the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, we've got some bridge demolition against the clock all the way from Idaho. Caterpillar controls idle time. An electric Volvo wheel loader goes to work. And Brisbane puts the UK to shame with its ambitious transportation plans. Plus, Zoomlion. Who knew they made excavators? But first, before we get to all of that, let's peer back through the mists of time to see what was happening on this day in history. Just quickly, for those that have just joined us, have a look at the bottom of the screen, type Volvo into the chat, because this, when I can get hold of it, this fine specimen is up for grabs today. There you go. Looks like that. Hauled all the way back from Frankfurt. You can thank me later. On this day in 1823, Charles Mackintosh of Scotland began selling raincoats, or Macs, as they would soon become known. Who knew? On this day, in 1901, former US President Theodore Roosevelt renamed the Executive Mansion to the White House. Didn't know that. On this day in 1915, the Ford Motor Company manufactured its 1 millionth car. They've turned out a few more than that since. In 1981, the statue of Christ the Redeemer, you know, the one with the arms spread, opened above Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. In 1978, Sid Vicious was charged with the murder of his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. In 1984, the IRA, on this very day, bombed the Grand Hotel in Brighton, where Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was staying. 5 people were actually killed in that. And in 1999, the 6 billionth human was born on planet Earth. That's the 6 billionth living human. There's been a few more over the years. I think we're at 7 billion now. So from 1999 to 2023, we've added another billion plus. Yeah. Now, before we get into the real meat of the show, let me very quickly remind you of our question of the day. Yes, our question of the day, no great surprise, comes from our resident quizmaster, Mr. Gary Muirhead, and it is simply this. Assuming you're working in a machine, do you get out from time to help your colleagues on the ground? Now, maybe I'm about to do you all a disservice, in which case, I apologise, but I'm going to guess here that the answer is at least partly weather dependent. If the sun's shining, do you jump down and pitch in? But if it's raining, do you just ignore their stares and turn the heating up a notch? I'd love to know. Let us have your thoughts in the chat. Just type a yes if you help those on the ground, or a no if you just sit there with your feet up and watch the world go by. Love to hear from you. We'll come back to that at the end of the show. And also come back to the prize draw for today's Volvo baseball cap, which just quickly looks like that. There you go. Now, one of these. Okay, we're going to start. I tell you what, let me just clear something up. I didn't know what Chris Wall was going on about. Not the first time that's happened, I have to say. But he referred to Frankfurt and Frankfurt. Now we're on the same page. Still don't know what he's going on about, but I'm used to that. We're going to start today's show with one of my favourite things, bridge demolition. The film you're about to see comes all the way from the US of A. To be more precise, it comes from Idaho. And if memory serves me right, don't think we've ever actually featured Idaho as part of this show before. So I strongly urge you to crank up the volume, sit back for the next 2.5 minutes and watch as this race against time unfolds. Well, that ended rather suddenly. I don't remember it ending like that when I played it yesterday. My apologies, but seriously, how satisfying was that? We have plenty more to show you this morning, including a visit to Brisbane as the city transforms its transportation system. Caught me completely on the hop, that did. But first, let's have some of this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
So yesterday, he says, trying to regain his composure. Yesterday, we were talking about two things, electric machines and idle times. Well, we're going to revisit both of those subjects right now. In just a few minutes, we'll show you how the mighty Caterpillar aims to control idle times and thereby minimize fuel and energy consumption. But first, we're heading off to see an electric Volvo L120 wheel loader in action. And it looks like this. And hopefully this one will end a little less suddenly than the last one. Well spotted, Dan Cullen. Yes, that is not the electric conversion that I saw over in Frankfurt. That is a slightly older one. I'm guessing it was some sort of prototype. Let's have a look. Now, I'm going to come to his comment in just a moment, but I'm going to go back to the news item that we featured a little bit earlier, because Nigel Williams, good morning, Nigel. Nigel is with us, and, you know, he likes to be a little outspoken, and I'd like to get his thoughts on this. And Mick Norton's here as well. I'd like to get his thoughts as well. Vistry, the house builder, has spelled out its 10% pay cut plan to subbies. Apparently, it's going to gather together all its supply chain and tell them that they need to trim their bills by 10% between now and January and going forward in order for Vistry to protect its bottom line. What do you make of that, gentlemen? Not just Nigel and Mick, but anybody else, if you care to have your say on that. Let's have a look. Nigel Williams says, one does wonder why more UK demolition machines aren't more widely fitted with hydraulic thumbs. Totally see the advantages in that video where they can dig and grab with just a bucket. The hydraulic thumb is a weird thing. It is completely divisive. You go to the States and you're considered a weirdo if you don't have one. You suggest a thumb to somebody in the UK and they laugh at you like you've just stepped out of prehistoric times. So I'd love to get your thoughts. Hydraulic thumbs. What do you make of them? Personally, not a fan, although I completely see where Nigel is coming from. Now, to get things back on track, yes, you might recall I got to see the Volvo L120H electric conversion machine, which was kind of the successor to the one that I've just showed you. That was when I was in Germany just a few months ago. Now, one of the concerns raised on yesterday's show was that Volvo is currently allowing 4 hours of operating time before its electric machines, or at least some of the larger ones, require charging. I made the point that if you eliminate all idle time, that could be enough to see you through a full working day or pretty close in certain applications. Well, it's not just Volvo that is seeking to make idle time a thing of the past. And I'll tell you more right after this. Going to throw this up. It's not the answer to a question, but I'm going to throw it up anyway. Wheel loader applications, says Nigel Williams, are most suitable due to be commonly being near the grid. Doesn't overcome that thing that JCB said, and it really has lodged in my brain. The fact that in construction, fuel goes to the machine. Everywhere else, the machine goes to the fuel, like you drive your car to a petrol station and you top up your car. In construction and in demolition, the fuel goes to the machine. Even with a wheel loader where you're possibly working near the grid, you're still taking machine to power. Not sure that's going to be the way forward, but Gary Muirhead on the 10% discount that Vistry is seeking. 10% off from companies that are already struggling at the moment will just push them over the edge. The final nail in the coffin for some. My thoughts entirely, to be perfectly honest with you. And as I say, my bigger concern, or my wider concern, is that could just be the tip of the iceberg. If Vistry do this and get away with it, then others will follow. We saw that back in 2008, 2009, and I can't remember which major contractor it was, but somebody went very public with the fact that they were taking their 60-day payment terms to 90 days. They actually boasted about this, I think mainly to keep their shareholders happy and content, but they actually boasted public about the fact that they were going to hang on to the money that they owed for 3 months. And sure as eggs is eggs, everybody else followed suit. So yeah, it could be just the tip of the iceberg, that one. Now, yes, we're going to go back to idle times because I was talking about that, wasn't I? I can't even remember if I've played the ad, so never mind. I think we can all agree that machine idle times equal wasted fuel and wasted energy. So Caterpillar has turned to technology to identify, manage, and ultimately abolish idle time. And this is how they're planning to do it.
Using VisionLink productivity, you can easily identify long, non-productive idle events. VisionLink Productivity visualizes what's happening with your machines on your job sites, and that extends to idling time. You can go into the job site dashboard, you can see where your machines are working and where they are idling. You can identify parts of the job site where you could take action to reduce long idle events. It may be in the dump zone, it may be in the load zone, it could be on the haul road. You may be able to implement changes that help cycle times, stop bunching for machines in the loading zone or the dumping zone, or even go as far as to see, have I got the right size loading tool for the trucks that I'm loading? Those long, medium and short idle events also impact not just productivity, but the cost for you to move material. The more that the machine is idling, the less it is being productive, the more fuel it's burning. The closer it's getting to its warranty, more CO2 is being produced, and it could even impact the residual value of the machine because you've got more hours than you needed to be because it is idling Using the map view and using a dashboard, you can easily see where those events are taking place and are they taking place where you expect them to. You can pinpoint locations on the map. You can see which machines are idling, when they were idling, and how long they were idling for. And taking that data, you can make changes to help improve the efficiency of the job site. All of that data is presented to you in a very simple, easy to understand visual format. To find out more about VisionLink productivity, visit cat.com or contact your local cat dealer.
That looking at idle times reminds me of a story that one of the JCB LiveLink team told me a year or two ago. They'd installed a generator to power some tennis courts somewhere in the Caribbean, if memory serves me correctly. After a few months, the customer came back to complain about the heavy fuel usage. The boffins at LiveLink looked into the telematics and discovered that the generators were starting automatically first thing in the morning to provide light for those early rising tennis players. But then the generator would just idle for the remainder of the day, bearing in mind the Caribbean, bright sunshine, and it was ultimately switched off manually in the evening. One quick phone call, fuel consumption, problem was solved, just went away. And that also reminded me of, and I did tell you this when I came back from seeing Combilift in Ireland a couple of weeks ago, how Combilift are offering as a free service the redesign of warehouse space. Now, obviously, they're doing it to sell more lift trucks, but the basic idea is if a customer has put in shelf space, well, it's every 3.5 meters apart, but you can actually get a lift truck that's only 1.5 meters, and it works sideways effectively. You can actually get twice as many shelving stacks into a space. Going back to that thing we just seen with Caterpillar, when I think of idle time, I tend to think of where you've got the dumper and it's just on tick over. Somebody's stepped off it, somebody's loading it, and then you get back on it and you put it in gear and away you go. That's my concept of idle time. But that idea of idle time with ADTs, while they're bunched and they're waiting for another ADT or dump truck to get out of the way so that they can be loaded, all of that burns fuel. Love to get your thoughts on that as well. Nigel Williams says, hydrogen is the future, Mark. JCB are on the right path. I agree, but don't let that stop you joining us on our show next Wednesday night at 7 p.m, which is obviously all about electric machines. Now, I think we've had a couple of comments on the lead story of today. Well, not our lead story, but Construction Inquirer's lead story, which was that Gary Muirhead has said it's what we used to call subby bashing. I think it's still called subby bashing, actually, but you're absolutely right. I don't even know how you'd have the nerve to go back to your suppliers and say, yeah, you know, that deal that we agreed, fantastic, but give us another 10% off. There's a good fella. Nigel Williams, the whole housing thing is a fiasco. In my honest opinion, Vistry, etc., have been paying huge sums to bank land, the gas that has been overvalued to lucrative postcodes. C3 Construction, ECL, MV Kelly are cutting pay rates by 10% this week. There you are. The rising costs are from fuel and materials. Perhaps if these morons stood up when the red diesel debacle was in the industry press, perhaps I could be more sympathetic to their struggles. Yeah, I mean, that red diesel thing cost us way more than 10%. And now, as I say, Vistry and probably their ilk, their kin in the house building industry will be doing exactly the same, looking for another 10% as well. We'll come back to all of the other bits and pieces. I think that covers all of that. Dan Cullen has responded, though. Nigel Williams, and I bet some of the operators will leave thinking they'll get better elsewhere. It will happen across the board very soon. Yeah, again, much the same as you've got Vistry looking for an additional 10% off. There will always be some supplier, some subcontractor that will agree to that. But by the same token, if you've got people being told their pay is being cut by 10%, there'll probably be somebody else not too far away that will be happy to plug the gap, at least temporarily. So yeah, it's a funny old time out there at the moment, people. So watch the horizon, I would say.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
You all know my feelings on the UK government's decision to curtail the HS2 high-speed rail network. I personally think it was short-sighted, cowardly, and that it showed a complete lack of both vision and ambition. Now, compare and contrast that with the ambitious plans of the city of Brisbane in Australia.
This city has big plans, and when we say big, we mean big. Skyscrapers, the Olympic Games, massive new mega projects pushing the bounds of engineering. And it's all happening down under. The next decade will see a transformation on an international scale, and it's all beginning right now with the biggest infrastructure project in the state's history. A new metro that burrows under the city itself. But this isn't Sydney or Melbourne, this is Brisbane, Australia's fastest growing city. Now, if you haven't heard of Brisbane before, then you're not alone, but the city has lofty ambitions. That much was clear when it won the bid for the 2032 Olympic Games.
The Games of the 35th Olympiad are awarded to Brisbane, Australia.
Brisbane is Australia's third largest city, but it's growing at a phenomenal rate. Around 1,000 people move into the region every week. While the Olympics are a part of Brisbane's rebranding as an international destination, it won the bid precisely because of the city's commitment to its ambitions and the massive new infrastructure already being planned. That includes the $6.3 billion mega project Cross River Rail. It's a 10.2 kilometre rail line with 5.9 kilometres of twin tunnels that dive under the Brisbane River and Central Business District. Essentially, they're building a massive new railway right below downtown Brisbane. The project includes 4 new underground stations and 8 upgraded stations, plus the development of 3 new Gold Coast stations.
Beyond that, what you've got is a network that hasn't been upgraded for quite some time. And so we've got stations in the inner suburbs, which some of them date back to when they were first built, were in the late 1800s.
That's Graham. He knows a lot about this project.
So I'm the CEO of the Cross River Rail Delivery Authority. It's really the biggest infrastructure project in the city's history, in the centre. And what it'll do is change the way in which people actually move around the city.
Cross River Rail seeks to rectify a major problem with Brisbane itself. You see, the city is defined by its river, for better or worse. And this river is a beast.
The Brisbane River is quite a large river. It's tidal and several hundred metres wide, and it's quite deep. So it creates a bit of a barrier, and it sort of separates the city from north to south. But it's a meandering river as well too.
Right now, there's only one crossing over the river, separating the city into 2 distinct halves.
In 1979, there was a bridge built across the river. But that's really the only crossing, and that constrains the way in which the rail network can operate. It constrains it to 24 trains per hour. Cross River Rail provides a second crossing of that river, but actually goes under the river.
The new railway will ease pressure on the current rail network, which is nearing capacity.
And this transformation that we're doing basically unblocks that bottleneck that's in the middle of the city, which is really tied to that historical development. So we're really sort of unshackling the core of the city.
Untying this knot will unlock enormous economic potential as well as revitalising previously disconnected precincts. The construction of the rail itself already provides the city with 1,500 jobs a year. There's a business case too. One report predicts the project's benefits will outweigh the costs by 1.9 billion Australian dollars. And for every dollar invested, the project will return $1.41 in benefits for Queenslanders.
The development, in some economic forecasting, multipliers take it to sort of $15 to $20 billion worth of growth, and in the order of 35,000 jobs around, just basically as a result of the interconnectedness that you're going to get out of having the rail system and then the development around those.
Perhaps the most important reason for the construction of Cross River Rail is the population explosion the region is expected to have. The population of southeast Queensland is forecast to grow from 3.5 million today to 4.9 million in 2036. In just a few years, that puts the region on par with Melbourne and Sydney. More than 80% of this growth is going to happen just outside Brisbane, while at the same time, 45% of job growth is going to occur in the Brisbane metropolitan area. This means that jobs are continuing to sprout up in the city while people are moving to the suburbs surrounding it. And there's a vital need for better public transportation to connect the two.
The stations really are adjacent to the CBD. So that means you travelling public have to walk about 10-15 minutes really to get to the centre of the CBD from the railway stations.
Not to mention, these new stations will link up with the Olympic Stadium, transporting the millions of expected tourists in 2032. But building under a major metropolitan area is no easy feat, and the engineering challenges themselves have been immense.
When you see it up close and personal, it is an engineering marvel. It's almost like doing, open heart surgery in the middle of the CBD, digging an excavation down, down about 50 metres below the CBD. That was to get below all of the services, get below the footings of the current high-rise office buildings and so forth. So it's actually the deepest hole ever dug in Brisbane, and we're putting the station into that because the tunnels have to weave their way underneath the middle of the city. So the tunnel boring machines do what they had to do to get under the river. The rock is very hard. They just ate it up.
The Albert Street station sits 31 metres below the heart of the city, and in such a densely packed area, every bit of space counts. That's where these mezzanines come in. They make use of these massive tunnels by creating a pedestrian level directly above the train tracks. Now, mezzanines aren't anything new, but the way these ones are being built is new with this segmental bridge technique. That's a pretty common practice for building bridges above ground, but constructing something like this in a tunnel underground is a whole new challenge. Here's how they're doing it. Each mezzanine beam is precast in massive concrete segments weighing up to 70 tonnes. They're then lowered down through this hole in the heart of the city into tunnels that will become the new train station. Because an underground station is a lot more cramped than a wide open space above ground, equipment was custom made to fit the site. Next, those three segments are connected into one single beam, which is picked up, rotated 90 degrees, and then placed onto the cavern arches to form the mezzanine level. This was all made possible thanks to the early integration of a digital twin of the entire project. It's essentially a virtual version of the Cross River Rail using software from Bentley. It was even first-person navigable, just like a video game. The model is so detailed that those on site can use it in real time, essentially as an X-ray, to see behind walls or what's behind them. It's also meant that other future projects in the city could access the model and plan around the new stations down to the millimetre. The digital twin has enabled engineering and construction decisions to be taken quickly and efficiently, reducing overall costs. Design flaws could be spotted and fixed before they even became a problem, while the progress of the entire project could be seen from every angle as it happened. The model will be used to train future drivers, as well as to update members of the public and brief ministers and the Premier. Specialist needs and disability groups are also using the model to ensure accessibility. Once the project's constructed, the digital twin will be used by operation and maintenance service providers.
When we started out on doing our 3D modelling, which we see as one of the sort of things that we're very proud of, there was no single solution that was actually going to give us what we want. Bentley, project-wise, provided the common data environment, which is the platform that we're using now. And really, they've been able to help us adapt. And as we've evolved the project and the model, Bentley have been part of that journey with us.
Cross River Rail is now well on its way to being delivered. Early works began back in August 2017, and major contractors commenced construction in late 2019. The project's set to open in 2026, well ahead of the 2032 Olympic deadline.
Using the Olympics as a means of a catalyst for that type of activity, is a really positive thing. We need to be Olympics ready.
The next decade is going to see phenomenal changes for Brisbane and southeast Queensland. And when you look at projects like this, you realise those changes have already begun. This video was sponsored by Bentley. You can learn more about how they're enabling projects like this at the link below. There's also the chance to dive deeper on this and the other topics on our channel over on the World's Best Construction Podcast, available now wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you subscribe to the B1M.
Yeah, I personally think Rishi Sunak and his cronies should be forced to watch that film and explain why a single Australian state has more ambition than an entire nation. Now, speaking of HS2 and all things related to, Nigel Williams says HS2 rollback is a huge mistake and will cost the Tories in the upcoming election. It needs to reach the heart of Scotland. I said that exactly in a recent podcast. For those of you that don't know, and I don't know why you wouldn't know, but for those of you who don't know, Nigel Williams does have a podcast. Very good it is too. It's called From the Seat of the Cab, and you can find it there. That is actually a link direct to the episode in question. HS2, haters gonna hate, he says. Haven't listened to it myself yet. Plan to do so after the show. I've got some writing to do, so I shall have that playing in the background. So go give that a listen and let Nigel know what you think. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen says 100% Nigel. Don't know why they wanted to stop at Manchester. Look at the Aussies. No constraints on major developments for the nation. That's exactly the point. No Andy Darvell this morning. Haven't seen him, but Andy, if you're out there and just being quiet, say hello. The Brisbane engineering marvel highlights why the average annual salary for plant operator jobs in Oz is from 60 to 75,000 Aussie dollars. Don't know what the going rate is or what the exchange rate is on that. So please, if somebody knows, please let me know. And hey, there may be a few operators watching here, looking at what's happening with Vistry, looking at what's happening with the likes of MV Kelly, cutting their pay to operators. They might be considering a move to Brisbane. Who the hell knows? Now, we've got one final film for you, which is only about a minute long, which means you've probably got about 2 minutes in which to enter our competition today. That is up for grabs. It's a baseball cap that says Electric RX, so that's Rallycross, CE dealer team. It's Volvo, it's Encon, it's Parker Hannifin. And it looks like that. Mesh back, one of those jobbies. Very smart it is too. If you'd like to win that, all you need to do is type Volvo into the chat. VOLVO. You can see it rolling. There it is. Going across the screen as we speak. Type Volvo into the chat and we'll be drawing the winner in just a few moments. First this.
If you would like to buy a limited edition Break Fast show sticker, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/demolition news/extras.
Zoomlion. According to the latest yellow table that ranks construction equipment manufacturers by reported sales, the Chinese manufacturer is 7th in the whole world and sits between Volvo, which is in 6th, and Liebherr, which is in 8th. Makes them a very, very big company indeed. I see them at international exhibitions like Bauma and ConExpo. And if memory serves me correctly, I actually picked up a Zoomlion baseball cap in Las Vegas last year, but mainly because the lady that was handing them out was dressed like a cheerleader. I like cheerleaders. Sue me. I've given that hat away, unfortunately. I did check this morning. It's not on the wall, so it must have gone out the door at some point. Dan Cullen's probably got it. Now, in my head, Zoomlion makes cranes and access equipment. But it turns out they make a lot more than that. I just needed to dig a little bit deeper. There you go. According to the yellow table, Zoomlion actually slipped down the rankings from 5th in 2021 to 7th in 2022. But could they make a comeback when the next table is published? And will we see Zoomlion excavators following in the footsteps of Lugong, Sany, Sunward, XCMG, and setting up shop here in the UK? Only time will tell. Now, let me have a look. Andy Dyson, you've arrived just in time. You need to type Volvo into the chat because we're about to do the prize draw. Yes, we are about to do the prize draw. I tell you what, I'm going to do it after my gripe because my gripe today is very, very quick. So I tell you what, let me throw over to that, and we'll come back to the giveaway in just a second. Not so much of a gripe today, more of an observation, really. Why is it that even though they have a 24-hour rolling news schedule to fill, the news media is able to concentrate on just one thing at a time? For more than a year, the news cameras have been pointed at Ukraine. They traced every bomb and every bullet, and President Zelensky became a fixture on the telly. Then that was parked, first for the dumpster fire that was the Tory party conference, and then for the Keir Starmer sideshow. And now all media eyes are trained on Israel and Palestine. It's almost as if they believe that other news stops when something big happens. All that being said, I bet Rishi Sunak is secretly grateful for the attack on Israel, as it means that, for now at least, no one is talking about his mishandling of the economy, the cost of living crisis, the migrant crisis, RARC, HS2, and a whole other bunch of things as well. Anyway, that's my gripe of the day. Love to hear yours. What is it that grinds your gears, gets your goat, generally butters your parsnips? The daily gripe therapy session will return probably tomorrow because I'm constantly pissed off about something or other. Now, it is time to find out who has won our prize of the day, and we had a few people come in literally under the wire, which means that we've actually got double figures in the hat, which is always worthwhile. So there we are. There are 10 entries. I'm about to roll the randomizer, and I can promise you, I mean, I literally don't even know how the randomizer works. I know it's random because I've seen it myself, but there's a little bit of me that already thinks that Dan Cullen's going to win this because, frankly, he does. But I'm going to roll it now. Here we go. No, we have a shock winner. Chris Ford. Chris Ford, you have yourself a brand new hat, my friend. Congratulations, mate. That is what it looks like. I'm sure you sent me your address fairly recently, but I don't know which platform you used to send it. So if you could remind me, that would be really helpful. And it looks like Chris was actually the last person to enter the competition. Not sure if that's a clue on how things are actually work, but and there's Gary Muirhead. Congratulations. Well done, Chris. Well done indeed. Yeah, don't forget to let me have your address and I will get that off to you. Dan Cullen is saying, congratulations, Chris. It's probably saying it through gritted teeth because I'm fairly sure he had his eye on that hat, but there you are. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying today. And we're going to be talking about Brisbane, and we're going to be talking about HS2, and we're going to be talking about idle times and whether or not you get out of the cab to help your ground worker colleagues and so on down the line. Stick around if you can. If you can't, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I'll be back right after this final word from our key show sponsor. Good morning, one and all. I've already said that, but I'm going to go back and say it all over again. Who was first off the mark this morning? I think, yes, it was. It was Glenn Johnston. Morning, Glenn. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you for being a regular. Really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate everybody being here, I have to say. Even now, and I will quickly mention, this is our 592nd, 592nd of this iteration of this show. There were shows before. I think I've done about 800 live shows now. So there were iterations before, but 592 of these. And yet every morning I turn on, I start the intro, and about 15 seconds in, when the counter is still reading 0 because Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube haven't kicked into action, the number of viewers says 0, and I'm convinced that everybody's cottoned on to the fact that basically I'm a bit of a scam artist and they haven't shown up. And then you arrive. So I am very grateful. Gary Muirhead is here as well. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, gang. Good morning to you, Gary. Thank you for your question of the day. Very specific, but I like that. And there's been plenty of interaction on it. Just to remind you what the question of the day was. If you are working in a machine, specifically an excavator, I guess, if you're working in a machine, do you ever get out of the cab to help out your friends and colleagues on the ground? And there's two schools of thought on this, which come to light in just a second. And while I thought it was going to be weather-related, happy to help in the sunshine, not so happy to help if it's chucking it down with rain, as it was here last night, turns out there is another distinction. We'll come to it in just a second. Yes, my good lady wife is currently laid up with a bad back. Dropped her purse, probably. Yes, she's suffering with a bad back at the moment, and she's feeling very poorly, sat on the sofa, propped up by cushions. So good morning, Ruth. And Gary Muirhead has echoed that precise point. There's good morning, good people. Hope we're all fit and well, says Chris Ford. Chris Ford, the prize-winning Chris Ford. Well done. There you are. Mrs. Demolition News has a bad back today, and there she is. Say good morning through gritted teeth. Hope Mrs. Demolition News gets better soon. So do I, because her place is by the ironing board or in the kitchen. I'm going to regret saying that in just a moment. Good morning. Ken Hatcher is here as well. Ken's got the same rain that we've had as well. It absolutely chucked it down here last night, but there was a bit of me that was kind of grateful of it because our garden has been looking a bit Serengeti-like of late. Jim Turner is in the house. Morning, Jim. Hope you're fit and well, my friend. Hope the Mrs. Turner is enjoying her sweatshirt. Conversation going on without me. Gary Muirhead, thank you, says my wife. There is Dan Cullen, just turned up early on. Mark Whiting's in the house as well. There you are. This is going back to the talk of Vistry, going to its supply chain and demanding. I don't suppose they're asking. My guess is they are demanding a 10% cut in costs. And Chris Ford says, this is a slippery slope. It's starting. How much further can you cut costs when you've been doing it for years? Yeah, let's not forget Vistry and all of its other major contractor cohorts will not have been accepting prices that are 10 or 15% over the odds. They will have already been cutting this to the absolute bone. And now they're going back and saying, yeah, never mind cutting to the bone. We're going to cut to the marrow instead. 10% is more than profit margin for a good many of those. There is Leslie McGeehee and Gary Muirhead, both entering the competition unsuccessfully this time, gents. But there's more to come. Dan Cullen says, not a chance, should not be the case, as that will cause rates for operatives to be lowered. It will have a knock-on effect. Think about it. It will have a knock-on effect right the way throughout. I mean, apparently this Vistry thing is aimed specifically at subcontractors. But if subcontractors are having to take a 10% cut, it's going to affect their wages. It's going to affect the suppliers of materials and that kind of thing. It's going to have a knock-on effect. It's going to echo all the way down the supply chain. I think this is really, really serious news. That's how you can leave us an audio message, speakpipe.com/demolition news. I thought fart may have been a better line for the hat, and we're talking about Frank Fart, actually. There is Chris Ford entering, and that was, I think, the winning entry. I think he entered twice. Not that matters. It makes no difference whatsoever. So there was the question of the day, which didn't come from me. It came from Gary Muirhead. And Gary has an interesting take on this, which we'll get to in just a second. The question was, if you are a machine operator, do you get out of the cab to help those on the ground? Just type yes or no. Some of you did. Mick Norton then turned up. Morning, Mick. Thank you for being here. We're back to all things Vistry. Unbelievable. What a bloody liberty. It is right. Me and Nigel have said rates will be reduced. This looks like it's happening. Yep, absolutely. Lots of entries. Now, do you get out of the cab and help your colleagues? According to Jim Turner, yes, he does. According to Ken Hatcher, yes, he does. According to Glenn Johnston, yes, he does. Dan Cullen, yes, I do sometimes if the guys are struggling or wondering how to get a task complete. Jim Turner then kind of takes a bit of a step back and says, this, but I only help the ones that are worth helping. Lazy, ignorant, useless twats get left to struggle. I could sense that sneeze coming for about a minute there. There's a good point out. Lou Dennison says, yes, he does get out and help. Morning, Lou. Let's have a look. Good morning, Nigel Williams. The thinking man's digger driver and also the host of a very fine podcast, which I'll be listening to a bit later today. Morning, Nigel. Thank you for joining us. Wishing Mrs. Demolition News a speedy recovery. Give her my regards. I will certainly do that. I could probably shout through the door now, but nobody wants to hear that. The music, I think, was for Bridge Demolition, and I'm fairly sure that video ended abruptly. It's about 2.5 minutes, and I think it only played for about a minute. Not entirely sure what was going on there, but Dan liked the music and liked the video as well. Now, going back to the question of the day, it was put by Gary Muirhead. Do you help those around you? And Gary Muirhead rightly says, no. You are more valuable inside the cab than on the ground. And if the site doesn't have enough ground workers on site, then they'll have to employ more. If you're self-employed and get out to help and become injured, will they pay you because that's your job? No, they won't. There is also, I wish I could remember which player it was said about. There's a bit of me that thinks it may have been Michael Owen back in the day, where Michael Owen, who was basically made of goals, he was a goal machine, was being criticised for not defending. And his manager basically stood up for him and said, you don't pay Michael Owen to defend, you pay him to score lots of goals. Same thing with an excavator operator. You're paying them to do precisely that. Just on the football note, I watched from start to finish the David Beckham documentary series. It was on Netflix last night. Very, very good indeed. I mean, I'll despite the fact that he made a nasty habit of scoring at West Ham every time Man United played them, I believe David Beckham to be a national treasure. If you like that sort of thing, go and give it a watch. It's very good. He comes across very well indeed. There we are. Nigel Williams says, one does wonder why more UK demolition companies aren't fitted with hydraulic thumbs. Totally see the advantage in that video where they can dig and grab with just a bucket. As I say, very, very divisive piece of kit that. Or I would say even more divisive than a tilt rotator. Obviously, we have two schools of thought, although I think the pro tilt rotator is gradually taking over. But there is a divide there. Some say tilt rotators make you a better operator. Others say if you need a tilt rotator, you're not a very good operator in the first place. There is a transatlantic divide on hydraulic thumbs. In the States, everyone has one. In the UK, we point and laugh. Don't know why that is, don't know how that's come about, but that is certainly the case. Going back to our question of the day. Question of the day says Mick Norton. Yes, back in the day, I always hopped out to assist ground workers. The partner card schemes of 2023 sadly given birth to a collective of prima donnas who remain sat on their fat asses and not part of the team. That's one of the things I like. I mean, I thought Gary's question was pretty innocuous, and yet, as divisive as it turns out, as hydraulic thumbs. Dan Cullen saying good morning to Nigel Williams. Nigel Williams then reckons that wheel loaders are best suited to electric conversion because they are commonly used near the grid, not in quarries so much. But I take his point. Dan Cullen agrees on the hydraulic thumb. Be a great addition to demo machines. I don't know if I'm overstating, but I'm fairly sure Dan is coming back into the field of demo in the not too distant future. Will you be asking for a thumb? I wonder. Ken Hatcher says, I get out to stretch my legs. Don't do any good sat in the machine all day without moving. It's a good point. Gary Muirhead back on the Vistry thing. 10% off from companies that are really struggling at the moment will just push them over the edge. The final nail in the coffin for some. And bearing in mind, this news comes after we've lost the likes of Buckingham Group, and I realise that Buckingham Group was bits of it were salvaged and so on down the line. But we've seen major contractors going under. those contractors going under will have cost the industry or the supply chain hundreds of millions of pounds, and now we've got the first that I'm aware of anyway, the first of the contractors going back to their supply chain saying, I know times are hard, but we'd like another 10% off, please. And I don't suppose they're saying please either. I would imagine there's a bit of a desk thumping going on. Gary Muirhead rightly says, it's what we used to call subby bashing. Yeah, remember writing about subby bashing back in the late 80s. Don't think it's ever stopped. Owen Jepson, morning Owen, says, Nigel Williams, there's loads where I'm at the moment. The Americans have got the right idea. See, I said it was a transatlantic divide, and yet we've got 3 people here. I respect each and every one of them and their opinions. They all believe that hydraulic thumbs are the way forward. Hydraulic thumb manufacturers, and there are many, maybe you need to have another look at the UK. Maybe you might be pushing on an open door. We shall see. Dan Cullen says, question of the day. Yes, I certainly get out and help the guys. Some of the guys I work with don't understand some drawings or have difficulty in getting things done. That's a great app and data format. That's going back to the Vision Link thing from Caterpillar, monitoring idle times. So many subjects up for grabs. We're going back and forth. We're flip-flopping here. Like not like Rishi Sunak. Let's have a look. The whole housing thing is a fiasco, says Nigel Williams. In my honest opinion, Vistry have been paying huge sums to bank land that has been overvalued due to lucrative postcodes. C3 Construction, ECL, MV Kelly are all cutting pay rates by 10% this week. I haven't seen that in the news. I need to go and have a bit of a dig on that. The rising costs are from fuel and materials. Perhaps if these morons had stood up when the red diesel debacle was in the industry press, perhaps I could be more sympathetic to their struggles. I think possibly more than just about anything I've covered in the last 3.5 years on this show. That red diesel, I think, highlighted, I can't think of a better word, but highlighted the weakness of the industry. The government comes along and says we're doing away with the subsidy on red diesel and we're going on to white diesel, and it's going to cost you, it's probably going to double your fuel bills. And with the notable exception of the Scottish Plant Owners Association and Callum McIntosh up in Scotland, the industry just went, oh, okay. I wish you wouldn't, but okay. And there we are. And now you've got the knock-on effect of that. Vistry looking for an additional 10% over and above. There's an L180C Volvo shovel loader near me with 32,500 hours on the clock and the original engine. No Volvo electric version will ever have that longevity and efficiency. Possibly not on the original batteries, but lack of moving parts and stuff, the machine itself could have. Nigel Williams says hydrogen is the future. JCB are on the right path. JCB are on the right path, but the path towards actually putting the infrastructure network hasn't even been granted planning permission yet. That's the concern. Ultimately, will electric end up being just at the bottom end? Probably. Will it end up just being a stopgap until hydrogen comes along in real force? Probably. But for the time being, it's electric is basically our, well, HVO, I guess, but electric is our only real alternative, which is why we're dedicating our show to it next week. And I do have, I'm fairly sure I have a slide that does that. There you go. If I take that off the screen, you'll be able to see it. Electric Earth Moving Equipment, our dedicated show, 7 p.m. next Wednesday, 18th of October. Be there. Or be square. Be whatever shape you damn well please, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, we'll be doing that on next Wednesday night. Please join us if you can. I'll be showing lots of electric equipment. I'll be very pro electric equipment. But honestly, the airwaves will be open for you to criticize, suggest alternatives, and so on down the line. So don't think for one moment, if you're not pro-electric, that the show's not for you. You are precisely who it's aimed at. Nigel Williams and I bet some of the operators are leaving and they will get better elsewhere, and it will happen across the board. very soon. Diesels have a very high compression ratio, using very little fuel when idling. Truckers leave their diesels running all the time, except when they will be down for days at a time. I wouldn't worry too much either way. Diesels have very little fuel consumption emissions at idle, but they do have some. They are still burning fuel. They are still producing emissions. Electric doesn't. You stop an electric, you stop an electric. There is no emissions. There is no idle. However, the flip side of that, Nigel Williams says this: I'm idling this big dozer during tea. I'm conscious of the CO2, NOx, net zero argument is interesting, but I'm sympathetic to how hard this thing is pushing, and letting it alone to idle keeps the coolant flowing and reduces the risk of catastrophic damage to the engine and the transmission. All good points, but bearing in mind, electric machines are largely dry machines, so things like hydraulic oil and that sort of thing, to a degree. But I take your point. It's a very good point, well made. Absolutely, 100% Dan, but when some of the ops are on £26 to £28 an hour, they should think twice before jumping ship, I guess that is. I watched a video last night on the Luton fire, and oh my God, was mad how quick it took over. Yeah. But as I said on the show yesterday, and Andy Darvell backed me up on this, when you've got 1,200 cars sat there all with fuel tanks full of fuel, or at least semi-fuel full of fuel, plus all the fluids, no great surprise. Plus, and I do realise, I do get the very distinct impression that the news media are taking an anti-electric stance. Because according to Andy Darvell, who actually knew people that were fighting that fire actually began on a Land Rover. And yet when I was watching BBC and Sky News yesterday, all they were talking about was electric vehicles and batteries exploding and that kind of thing. Was not an electric machine that started the fire, but electrics are being hauled over the coals for it. Dan Cullen, going back to our that project in Brisbane, well done to the Aussies. That's one hell of a project. 100%. There is Nigel Williams. HS2 rollback was a huge mistake and will cost the Tories in the upcoming election. One can only hope. It needs to reach the heart of Scotland. I said exactly that in a recent podcast. I saw something the other day, and I don't know how true it is. To be honest, I was that angry I didn't bother to pursue it. But apparently, there was in place within the EU. The EU was very keen, as part of the whole sustainability drive, reducing vehicle movements and the like. Apparently there was a grant fund within the EU that could be drawn upon by EU member states to help fund high-speed rail networks. Obviously, the UK left the EU, and the piece that I saw basically said, as a result of leaving the EU, we were not therefore entitled to a part of that grant funding, and as a result of that, the Tories just went, stop. And yet, as Nigel Williams has said, I mean, to be perfectly honest, when you think about it, London to Birmingham, who cares? London to Manchester, okay. London to Manchester and Leeds, okay. London to Scotland, yeah, link the whole country together, and yet we can't even go from one city to another. Mark Whiting says he does jump out of the cab and help his colleagues. I'm sure they're grateful. Let's have a look. Be a great project to be involved in. I wonder how many UK operators are looking at that right now. I'm thinking, I could do with a couple of years working in Brisbane and possibly a little bit longer. And I would imagine, knowing the way that Australian immigration works, applying to just move there, not particularly easy. Applying to go there to help bring home a major project ahead of the 2032 Olympics. You may just get in there. Dan Cullen asked, was that AI talking? It did sound a bit robotic. I'm not entirely sure. To be honest, the cadence of his voice sounded a bit too good to be robot, but it may have been. What is this one saying? Dan Cullen, 100% Nigel. Don't know why they wanted to stop at Manchester. Look at the Aussies. No constraints on major developments for the nation. Yeah. Major developments for the nation. And here we just went, nah. Who else have we got? Andy Dyson snuck in under the wire, entered the competition, didn't win, unfortunately. But Chris Ford, I'm sure, is very, very happy. After this morning, I'm wondering whether I've still got some hair on my head for the cap to cover. Well, listen, why do you think I'm wearing a cap? For those of you that have joined the show in later months, there is a light above my head. I don't use it anymore. There's a light above my head. And I am unquestionably sitting on top. I make no secret of the fact. But when I used to use that light instead of the dedicated light in front of me, it looked like I had a halo. And as I've said in previous shows, nobody, particularly me, requires a halo. Question day also depends on the guys on the ground. If they're backstabbers, cocky or know-alls, I wouldn't bother them. Let them figure it out for themselves. Now we've got some weird stuff here. I don't know if this is the guy that was here the other day. Not sure at all what that means. And he has another go. And this is how to really ingratiate yourself with people. He says, "Hey, old fart, please reply." Okay. Off. Question of the day. Only one issue with getting out the cabs, as in CITB regulations. If you have an accident or hurt yourself, you are not insured to be out of the cab. It's a good point. Goes back to what Gary Muirhead was saying. It'll keep the noggin warm in winter, says Dan Cullen. How's our quizmaster Gary Muirhead today? From judging by the comments and the questions, firing on all cylinders, but I'll leave that for Gary to answer himself. Was an electrical issue with a Land Rover Defender, as they have been on recall due to this issue with their electrical system, as the video clearly showed the Defender on fire. So will Land Rover be held accountable on Luton Airport, as that would go into millions with insurance? Did they ever get to the bottom of the calls and the trying to claw back costs with the fire up at was it the Liverpool Arena or something like that a couple of years ago? I do remember because the fire had rendered the car park unstable, that they were actually using a high-reach demolition excavator. I'm trying to remember the name of the company that was doing the demolition up there. Who is it that Ryan Noon works for? Because I tell you what, while you're doing that, if I go to LinkedIn and I have a look for Howard Stott did the demolition up on that Liverpool car park after the fire. And they were using a high-reach excavator to literally pick cars up and put them on the ground. Obviously, writing the cars off in the process, but there was no other way around it. My understanding is the cars were then parked up so that people could go and reclaim their belongings, assuming they'd survived the fire. Wonder what's going to be the case with this one. And I did hear last night that apparently they were trying to build a ramp up to parts of that burned out car park at Luton to potentially drive some cars out. Not sure how that's going to pan out. I'm not sure quite what I certainly hope somebody sent a structural engineer in to have a good look at the actual integrity of that car park before they start wondering about cars and that kind of thing. Anyway, folks, I need to get to the post office, assuming Chris can remind me of his postal address, because I've got to get that in the post. I've also got an article to write that I've been planning to write for about the last 3 weeks and still haven't got around to it. So that'll be me today, and then I'll be back again tomorrow for the final show of the week. I'm sure we can find something to give away tomorrow. I don't know what it'll be, but we'll find something. So yeah, sure. If you fancy winning a prize tomorrow, I know we've still got some Kent Demolition stuff to give away. I'll do another one of those. So if anybody fancies winning a Kent Demolition mug, pens, mints, and I think there's key rings in there as well, join us for tomorrow. Until then, everybody, really go and have a fantastic day. Hope the rain is not too bad where you are. If you are sat in the cab and your fellow workers are struggling a bit on the ground, 2 things. it would be nice to help them, but maybe you shouldn't. Good question, Gary. Really like that. Everybody go and have a fantastic day. And as Dan Cullen says, have a great day. Stay safe. Please do that, because we want to see you here tomorrow. And there is Paul Deacon. Don't remember seeing Paul here before. Just before I head on out the door, let me very quickly give Paul his welcome confetti. Paul, we start at 10 a.m. If you're around tomorrow, join us. We'd love to hear where you are, who you are, what you're about. Welcome to the club, and thank you very much indeed for being here. Everybody, go and have a fantastic day. See you tomorrow. All the best.